After over a year on the sidelines, student athletes of Washington, D.C. are finally hitting the field once again. Under Mayor Bowser's most recent orders, all student athletes of the DCSAA are officially back in the game. This includes sports previously considered high risk, as in lacrosse and of course football. As great of news as this is, the reality is that COVID is still very much amongst us. Here to discuss how to stay safe and how to stay in the game is my dear friend, Dr. Ricky Heath. Dr. Heath, thank you very much for joining us today here, brother.
Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
Let's go ahead and begin with a situational update. Of course, when the coronavirus pandemic initially took the United States and really the world by storm over a calendar year ago, the overwhelming thought was that the sick and the elderly were those at the highest level of risk, and that even proved to be true at that point. Over a year later, though, how has the situation changed? What are you seeing trending? Who are being infected at the highest rate?
Yeah, so you know, in the beginning of the pandemic, it was very clear if you were sick, older, and a minority, you were more likely to have bad outcomes. And with the hospitalizations, we were seeing predominantly over age 65. Since the vaccination wave has come, we have seen some changes or trend changes. So now we're actually seeing the predominant of people being under age 50. So 30, 40, 50 make up about 36% of the hospitalizations. And then between 50 and 65 is 31% of the hospitalizations. So really we're seeing a shift towards younger people becoming sicker and being in a hospital. That does make sense because of the way we rolled out the vaccinations, starting with the older people first, so they have better protection.
As much as we know about the virus thus far, there's still so many things that are unknown to a large portion of the community. I want to start with the basis, though. How is the virus most easily or most commonly transmitted, and what should we be looking out for in terms of staying safe? Right.
So the COVID virus is transmitted like most viruses, particularly through droplets. And so when I say droplets, I like to tell people to imagine you're running your hand underwater and then flick your hand on a wall. You won't see anything, but if you look at the wall, you'll see splashes of water. And that's what droplets are. They typically come from either our mouth or our nose when we sneeze, or mouth when we're breathing. And being in a certain distance with a person who's infected with COVID, coming in contact with their droplets is predominantly the way that the virus spreads. Other ways are ways other viruses spread. So someone sneezes on a hand, coughs on a hand, touches something, you come up right behind them, touch it, and then you touch your face, and you can actually infect yourself through your eyes, your nose, or your mouth.
And I know that one of the more recent updates from the CDC, at least going back about 3 or so months ago, is that sports and athletics were broken up at the high school level in terms of risk levels, low, moderate to high. And one of the reasons is naturally you thought that contact sports, there would be a higher risk of transmission. What we've come to find out is that that the spread is less in the actual playing of the game for high school athletics, and more so in after the game, in the locker rooms, and the hanging out, and just the basic one-on-one conversation of student athletes. Is that kind of conducive with what it is that you're saying in terms of the spread via droplets?
A lot of times in sports, you have mouth guards in, you're keeping your mouth closed. So even though when you have your heart rate up, your respiratory rate up, you're breathing harder, so it's easier to expel a little bit further. With sports, the highest risk becomes in that very close contact with the people that you know, that you trust, that you relax, and you're touching stuff in the locker room together.
I want to get to a very real topic here, Dr. Heath, and that is vaccinations. Vaccination hesitation is a very real thing, especially in the predominantly black and brown cultures and the neighborhoods and the communities. And many would say that this is for great reason. I mean, this goes all the way back to the Tuskegee experiments, and many of us have never regained the trust from there and moving forward. From what it is that you've seen thus far from vaccinations, though, what is both the safety rate of the vaccinations as well as the efficacy as it comes to keeping us safe from COVID-19?
Yes. So you touch on a very, very, very important point about us as African Americans, Black people, Latino people. There is good cause to be suspicious of our healthcare system because our healthcare system hasn't been equitable historically for us, even today. When we look at the health inequities that are experienced by minorities, it's typically one of exclusion. So even with the Tuskegee experiment, what made that experiment so terrible is that they left untreated Black men with syphilis, even though we had an available treatment. When you look at some of the health inequities now, again, it's still about not having access, not getting pain medications, not getting the same heart procedures or heart medications. And so when we think of the COVID vaccine, we should not think of it as I don't want to get it because I don't know what they're trying to do to me, but as I am going to be the first in line because historically we have not been able to get the treatments that we should. Now, with that said, the vaccine is extremely safe as well as very efficacious. So when we're looking at the vaccine efficacy, we're talking about based on the studies, 94 to 95% for the Moderna and the Pfizer, so 94 to 95% protection. And then with the Johnson & Johnson, it's a little less. It's important to understand Johnson & Johnson came after, so we had different variants. But we're looking at about, in the US, about 72% efficacy. Now that's not the main, that's important reason to get it is to, keep us from getting the COVID vaccine. But when we look at why we should be saying that we're going to get it the most, is not actually to prevent us from getting COVID, it's to prevent us from getting sick. So when you look at for people who do get COVID, the rate of people who end up hospitalized or dead is almost zero in the people who are vaccinated. So that's where it becomes very important for us to get the vaccine, particularly, again, if you're Black or you're Latino. Because when we look at where we are now, as of May 26th, Black people for hospitalizations, Black and Latino, make up about three times more likely to be hospitalized than white people. When you look at death, Black people are about 1.9 more times likely, or 2 times more likely to die from COVID-19 or complications of COVID-19 than our white counterparts. As well as Latino people, about 2.3, so around 2 times more likely to die from COVID-19 complications than our white counterparts. When you look at how we make up as far as vaccination percent, when you look at all people that are vaccinated, Black people make up about 8.6% of the population that has been fully vaccinated thus far. Hispanic people make up about 12.6% of the population that have been fully vaccinated thus far. And then white people make up about 61% of the vaccination. So we clearly have a much higher risk for having all of the bad things happen to us, hospitalizations and death, but we're not seeing the vaccination the way we should. And that's why I make a point to, even if you don't get 100% protection from from being COVID infected itself, you do get protection from the complications, which we're seeing more in our Black and Latino counterparts.
Dr. Heath, all of that makes all the sense in the world, but right now there's someone watching this that says, you know what? I got a distrust in this whole entire thing, and you, sir, are a doctor. It's your job to say these things. So that said, my question to you is, if you have, and I don't know, but if you had a younger brother, if you had a son who is of age, would you instruct them? Would you tell them that it was a good idea to get vaccinated?
Yeah, I've had this conversation with multiple of my family members, and I got the vaccine. My wife, who is due for our third baby in a week, got the vaccine when she was in her second trimester.
Congratulations! Yes.
Thank you. And that's because we realize, I think a lot of people are saying, you know, I don't know about the vaccine. I don't know about the long term effects of the vaccine. But what I would say is we don't know about the long term effects of COVID. We are seeing something now, and this goes for we're seeing this in young people who had mild and moderate infections or symptoms from COVID 19. We're seeing something called post COVID syndrome, or what's commonly termed as long haulers, COVID long haulers. These are people who had mild infection, got over the infection, but have these lingering symptoms that we can't really fully explain. And there's enough of them now to know that this is not something that's psychological. This is a physical response to having COVID, where they commonly have headaches, they have fatigue, muscle aches, and we're seeing it 8 months out after having a mild infection. So we want to think about preventing that as well. We don't know that the vaccine prevents that, but some of the theory behind it suggests that the vaccine likely would. Because when you get infected with the virus, your body is still learning how to fight the virus, and it throws everything at it. And your immune system gets revved up, and you get collateral damage where you have other organs where the virus is not playing a major part, being affected by the inflammation. When you get a vaccine, if you were thinking about it as sports, when you get a vaccine, it's like watching tape and then going to a scrimmage. So you give your body a little piece of the virus that's inactive, and you say, hey, I want you to learn this, and I want you to practice, so that when you actually come in contact with the virus, if you do get infected, your body's already trained. It says, we prepared for this. We know where we're going. We're going to handle this. Nobody else has to worry. So in theory, your body's prepared. You're going to have less collateral damage, and it's going to take care of the virus much quicker than it would if you just got infected and hadn't been vaccinated.
It is like getting the film before the scrimmage. That's a correlation right there,
Right.
Doctor. I see why you're so good at what you do. Look, I'll get you out of here on this, brother. So we're heading into the summer. With all that we know of things is as the temperature warms up, the virus decreases, and that is, to my understanding, what we're seeing: decreases in deaths, decreases in hospitalizations as a total. Everything is opening up in some way in just about all 50 states as well. So those that are saying to themselves, "Hey, COVID is over. I am safe. I'm good. I don't need to get vaccinated or get the vaccination." What is your message to that individual?
My message is COVID is still here. And particularly for the young athletes, you don't want anything that can possibly interrupt your play. Again, we don't know how the body responds long term to the infection. Also, this is what we waited for. This is what we've been waiting for since the start. Why would you take a risk now? We have something that's safe, that's effective. Why wait? Why take the risk?
Yeah, take the shot. I tell you what, you are spot on with that. I can't tell you how many student athletes that missed their season last year said to me personally, if there was anything I could do to get on the field, I would do it. So now, getting the vaccine is what will keep our student athletes on the field. Dr. Heath, thank you so very much for stopping by and speaking with us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Ricardo Report, bruh.